be terrible, but we can't be sure of that. And as a parent, you face struggles and difficulties, and you are not to blame for these. It's your responsibility to fix it, but you're not to blame. And someday you'll get a little rest. And here is one of my favorite photos of one of my favorite people. This is my husband. This is at our friend's house. They have a very comfortable couch. And this is how my husband is caught on it when we go there. I think we need to get one at home. So one day you'll get a little rest. And after the webinar, hopefully we will send you a recording and some links to resources, including I really like to chat with you. I like to get to know you. I'm really love to hear from you, and I'm really very happy to organize a short 20-minute consultation that's free, where I can get a bit more of a picture of what's going on for you and head you in the direction of some helpful resources. So do please get in touch. My aim today is to talk a little bit about why children need limits and how they show you that that's what's going on. 2 tools you can use to handle the whole process of limit setting. One's called Special Time. We teach 5 different tools, and one of them is called Special Time, which is a place where you can offer your child a generous yes. Yes, I'd love to. Yes, you can. And then setting limits and bringing limits, which is where one brings a warm no. A lot of how limits were set for us when we were young is that we weren't met with warmth. We were met with disapproval. And turns out that connection is what keeps things going. And that limit setting is no different in that than any other piece of parenting. And I'd like to talk a little bit about getting support for you, because we want the best for our kids, but it's challenging and difficult, and we need, it's emotional. We need support. So also to say that we're trying the very best we can, and we all make mistakes. It's actually not a perfect art. Just like this, I like this little duck who's out taking her little ducklings for a walk with the best of intentions, but she didn't plan all that well, or she didn't have enough experience to know, and she heads into trouble. And then she has a difficulty she has to overcome. So here, my aim is to help you avoid and recover from your parenting fails. We get very focused on avoiding, but these listening tools are as good for recovering as they are for preventing damage in the first place. We get very, very focused on trying to keep things right in the first place, which is important, but a lot of it's outside of our control. But what is in our control more than anything else is the repair. A little bit about me. I have done many different things. Including being a carpenter, but the thing that eventually I found my way to, better late than never, was being a parent, which has been a rich and wonderful experience, and I'm so glad I squeezed it in. I've worked with hand-in-hand parenting for over 30 years before I had a child. And then when I had a child, that's when I really got interested in, very quickly you start to share these tools with other parents. And it was a way too of building support and contact around parenting for myself. So I've been doing it for a while. Mostly online these days, so you can get to me from wherever you are. And afterwards, if I have your email address, I'll send you some information, and you can learn more. You can visit my website, Madeline, Madeline, winter.com. I highly recommend a short online course which Hand in Hand Parenting host, which you can find more about. And I have a number of pages of information and resources that you might find useful. And again, I offer one-on-one coaching and advice. I also run groups, parent groups. So get in touch with me. Probably email's the easiest, madeline@madelinewinter.com. So a little introduction to Hand in Hand Parenting. It's an organization that was founded in the US. It's all over the world. And we teach several tools. Four of them are adult to child, and one is about building support for yourself, adult to adult. We don't have nearly enough emotional support as parents. We focus on a balance, creating a balance of connection and correction. A lot of what is out there is very focused on correction, and it's very, setting limits doesn't work unless your child feels well connected to you and to themselves. So we use child-directed play, quite structured. Oh, well, there's both structured and unstructured play that builds your relationship with your child in very efficient and deep ways. And then when children are carrying emotional tension, they go off track. So that's when we need to set limits. Sometimes we can do that playfully, which I won't have a lot of time to talk about today, but it's tremendously powerful. But in general, what happens is that we set limits, there are upsets, and that is the process where a child's capacity to think is restored. The emotional tension that's driving off-track behavior is resolved, and everyone can figure out a workable solution to whatever the problem is. I call this the love triangle. So there's connection, there's correction, and there's support at the foundation, which is the support that you need in order to parent the way that you want to parent. You need a place where you can offload, where you can get understanding and perspectives, and where you can plan for the parenting challenges you're up against. So though all those things combined build what's called emotional safety into your relationship with your child, which is the thing that you're really after. You want your child to trust you. This is a long-term project. You want your child to want to come and be with you when they're 24. And that's got to be the focus. One of the topics that commonly comes up when we're talking about limit setting is timeout, and timeout for children does not work. There's pretty clear research about that. When a child is off track, that's when you're going to be setting limits. And when they're off track, what they need is connection. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to let them do whatever they want to do. That's not actually useful at all. But timeout doesn't work. It does work for parents. We need time out. We need a place to get out of the situation where we've been triggered, to download how we feel about it, to get support and advice and thinking and make plans. Our children need time in, and I will talk today about some tools for giving them time in. They need time in to connect with you. They need time in to show you how they feel and process how they feel. And when you give them that, what you'll find is thinking and cooperation follows. The other thing that it took me a while to really get working with these tools is that parenting is limit setting. There's not some tricky set of techniques that if you just get them exactly right, somehow will work miracles in your family, and your child will, if you just say it right, or you know, 1, 2, 3 magic. I'm not a fan. It doesn't work that way. You don't need to do it perfectly. You don't need to do it constantly. You don't need to be consistent. I will talk a little bit about that, because effective parenting is about making an assessment of the total sort of balance of connection in your family. Yours, your child's, there's your partner's, the other children in the family. Though that's what you need to keep your eye on. And where you set limits and when you set limits is very much dependent on your assessment of the state of connection in your family. And limit setting is about feelings as much as it's about anything else. We tend to assume it's about connecting, it's about thinking. If I just state this clearly enough, if I just explain it well enough, my child will understand. And that is a completely wrong framework for understanding what's going on. Once a child's off track, they're not in their rational mind, they're in their feeling mind. They're not in their thinking mind. And we need to reach them in their feeling mind, and their thinking mind will follow. And it's also about our emotions, how we're feeling, how connected we feel. If we're not in good shape, then we can't bring the connection that's needed, and the limit setting will just end up damaging our relationship with our child. I'd like to talk a little bit about my friend Thomas. This was some time ago. It's the car seat saga, which many of you with young, really little ones will have experienced. It's where your child won't stay in the car seat. So Thomas's brother had just started school. His brother was about 5 years older than him. So Thomas was little. Thomas was fairly new to an early childhood setting. So he was beginning that process of being in care. And the family was under the stress that a family is under when a child first starts school, which is a really major transition for everybody. So Thomas had been at childcare all day, and we picked up the older boy and we were picking Thomas up. And Mum managed to get him into his car seat, but I could tell he wasn't quite right. We got halfway around the corner and Thomas starts to climb out of his car seat. And at that point, his mum had an option, which was to try to tell him how important it was that he stay in his car seat, which is generally what many of us will do. Honey, I can't go any further unless it's really not safe, blah, 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 blah. At that point, the reality is that Thomas wasn't acting from a thinking mind. And because he was in distress, he couldn't absorb any information or instructions. He was not going to get back in the car seat. Fortunately, his mum had a good instinct for this. And so Thomas's reasoning was offline. And we stopped the car. She got out of the car and she just went round to his side of the car, opened the door and just put her hand on him and put her face close down to him. I don't think she said anything at all except maybe sweetheart. And so she connected with him. And Thomas burst into tears, sobbed and sobbed and sobbed for about 5 minutes. I'm beginning to think, we ever got to get out of here. But it was a remarkably short time. And then she said, how about we put you in your car seat? Put the strap you in. And he let her do it, and we could get on our way. Now, car seat sagas are often an indication of a lot of tension around coming and going and having to do things they don't want to do for young ones. So I won't promise that they'll always be resolved that easily. But what worked in that situation was that she connected with him and he had a big cry, and that the upset was the pathway to cooperation. I think what was going on was that he was at the end of his tether. He'd spent a whole day in childcare, which was a fine childcare place, but he's disconnected. He's feeling, he's just having a lot of feelings and he can't do what needs to be done. And she just knew to connect with him. When she connected, those feelings became available. She knew to listen to him, and then he was able to do what needed to be done. In short, those are the steps that we need to go through to effectively set limits. So connection is what greases the wheels of family life. it's profound. The human need for a sense of connection with other humans is profound. They've done, just a couple of little anecdotes, they've done some research with twins in utero, and it turns out they were studying behavior patterns, and the twins behave differently towards each other than they do. They respond physically differently when they're in contact with each other than they do when they're in contact with their home, which is their mother's womb. So, like, from the very, very start in utero, we are tuned into where there's another human being, and being in contact with that human being is incredibly important. And you know, we've all come through this extraordinary 3 years. I don't think we're out of it yet, but in the middle of the lockdown of the pandemic, I needed to go and see a doctor, and I made an appointment up at the local medical centre to try and do it as a telehealth appointment. I don't know what the rules were, but anyway, they wouldn't let me do that. So I had to go up there, and I went and saw this young doctor who I've never met before, and I'll probably never see again. And I was so struck. This was in the middle of the lockdown, so we weren't seeing anybody. I felt so much better after 10 minutes with this young man who, as I said, I don't know, he doesn't know me, but there was just something about being in face-to-face contact with somebody. I recently went to visit a friend in Melbourne, and my daughter ended up with COVID, so we couldn't, my friend was older and we couldn't go and see her. So she and I stood at the end of the driveway, but even seeing her at the end of the driveway there was something important about that. So we need to connect profoundly. It's what makes us able to function well. And what we need to do as parents is build connection credits. So I like to think of it as a relationship bank account, and the thing that is credit in that bank account is connection. And the tool of special time, which I will talk about in a minute, is an incredibly efficient way to build connection credits in your relationship bank account. And setting limits uses credit. So setting limits won't go well unless there's enough credit in the bank. And sometimes just putting a deposit of credit in the bank, of connection credit, through doing a little bit of special time with your child, sometimes that's enough to put enough sense of connection into the bank that your child can move along with something that needs to be done. Sometimes it's not that straightforward, but it's extraordinarily powerful. And we need to top up the relationship bank account regularly, because life's full of limits, basically, and children feel them, and they feel the withdrawal from the connection, the withdrawal from the relationship bank account every time we bring a limit. So it's a relationship bank account. If you've got lots of struggles and you're finding that you're having to do a lot of limit setting, it probably means that the connection credits are low. At times where the connection credits are high, you'll tend to find that there's a lot more closeness and cooperation. And in the pathway from sort of a poor connection credit to a better, a more plumped up bank account of connection, is an emotional process. So basically what we want to do is keep the balance. There's struggles. Our children are off track and they're wanting to do unworkable things and they're full of feelings. We connect with them, play a tool called special time, just hanging out sometimes. We correct where there's enough connection in the bank, and we set limits, and then we listen to upsets, and what we get out the other end is cooperation, reasoning and thinking and workable solutions. And Patty Whitfler founded Hand in Hand Parenting, and I love this quote. I also love this photo. But when children are pushing our buttons, like, we often react because because it's pushing our buttons. It's actually they're pushing our buttons because they can't feel anyone there. And more than anything else, they need to feel that there's someone there. They need to feel connected. And connection really is the oxygen for their minds. So a fantastic way to build connection, and this is where I start. You come to a talk about limit setting and you want to know how to set limits. And if you came and did some time with me, what I would say to you is the first step is to get a regular practice of special time in your relationship with your child. You need to be regularly checking in with them, giving them space to show you what they're interested in, having them have a sense that you are deeply on their side. So this is the big yes. It's a one-on-one child playtime. So one adult to one child. You can actually have more than one adult, but it's a one-child playtime. This will almost always present a challenge for parents who have more than one child. You'll need to spend some time figuring out how you can structure this into your family life. You'll definitely find it's worth it. But it is a challenge to find one-on-one time with each of your children. And when you do, what you want to do is you want to name it. You need to time it. Special time cannot go for hours. It needs to be 15, 20 minutes. I wouldn't recommend more than about an hour. Once you're playing for that long, if you've got that in you, you're really probably at a point where you're going to have to set a limit around something. And that's not what you want to be doing inside special time. You really want to set it up so you can go with whatever they're suggesting. So you tell your child, honey, I've got 10 minutes, it's special time. What would you like to do? And you basically do your best to bring your enthusiasm and your delight to the play or to whatever it is your child wants to do. Little ones will play. And in this play, just as a general rule, the idea is the child is the powerful one. They're the more powerful, the swifter, the more knowledgeable. They get to win. And part of what happens in special time is that a child will turn the tables. They will play out, little ones will use play, and they'll play out an experience. And they'll be playing it out from what you want to help them do is play it out from the position of being powerful. I'll talk in a minute about an example of that. And as I said, it needs to be timed and announced. They need to know how long they've got you. You need to know how long you have to last. When I first started doing this regularly with my daughter, I went and found the biggest timer that I could find, so that sometimes she would be doing something that I would just find so boring. And I could look at the timer and think, I've only got 45 seconds to go. So it's a challenge for us, and we don't have to. This is not a recipe for parenting all day, every day. This is special time. It's a time out where you really give them your all. It builds connection credits in an incredibly efficient way. It provides relief to young ones from just the pressure of being young, where you're not in control of very much, where you're constantly being told what to do, and in particular where you're the smaller, the less knowledgeable, the less competent. Children will use play, if you create this space for them, to be the one in charge, and it boosts their confidence extraordinarily. It also opens up a communication highway with your child. So a lot of the time children won't come and tell you what was wrong. They may not even be able to articulate it. If you ask them how the day was, they won't have much to say. But if you set up special time with them, you will get hints in what they choose to play around what it is that's going on in their life, what they're interested in, what they're worried about, what things they would like to master. It's an incredibly interesting and powerful tool. In this photograph, these are my neighbors from some time ago. And what the little one here is doing, she's playing doctors. Any child who's had experiences with the medical system, if you give them a doctor's kit and you look like you're willing to be their patient, that's what they will want to do. They will want to, effectively, they're working through the experience from a powerful position. So they will want to do it to you. And you get to be the happy patient in this example. So special time is a way of providing time in for children. And basically what's going on here is that when children are experiencing emotional tension, so Thomas's day at preschool just loaded him up. It wasn't a bad experience. There was nothing terrible going on there, but just something about the complexity of the experience, the fact that probably the adult to child ratio doesn't leave a lot of room for a child to kind of have upsets when they need to. He comes out of childcare bottled up. He has a sense of disconnection, and he shows us that. He signals that he's disconnected by going off track. He tries to climb out of the car seat. At that point, we need to understand that we're getting an emotional signal from our child. There's a problem, but it's emotional. We'll often step in really quickly to try and fix up the problem, but we need to do that a whole lot less than we think we do. So, our child wants a red sippy cup, not a blue one. They want to eat beans, not peas. They want that toy that their brother's got. And we'll move in and give them a different sippy cup, or change the color of their jumper or their sweater, or, go to a lot of trouble to try and present a meal that looks like they might be prepared to eat. And all of those things are fine to try. But if you've tried something a couple of times and a child's still not really able to cooperate, it means what they're sending you a signal. Their signal is, I'm in trouble emotionally. And you don't actually need to fix the problem. You can just bring a limit. Sweetheart, yeah, we're going to have a blue sippy cup. I know, sweetie, you want that toy. You don't have to arbitrate over squabbles about things between kids. You just need to move in and allow a child to have the feelings about wanting or not wanting to share, either the flip sides of the same coin, really. So the point is that once a child signals that they need help, that they're in emotional distress, you need to interrupt whatever behavior is being driven. You've got to stop the car so that you can get them back in the car seat, and you need to connect. And when you connect, if they've got big feelings in their emotional backpack, they'll start to offload them. And your job is to listen to the feelings. It's important not to take them personally at that point. And if you do that well enough, and sometimes you need to do that a few times, what you'll find is a child's capacity to think kicks in. It doesn't mean that the solution will necessarily be the one that you set out at the beginning, but between the two of you, you'll figure out a workable solution. So ways that young ones show that they need connection, ways that they go off track. When they're off track, the reason I'm talking about this is because you're often needing to set a limit when your child is off track. And the reason they're off track is because they're carrying emotional tension. So you need to address the emotional tension as much as anything else. So children will use pretexts to get upset. They're about finding a way. Sometimes children will almost set up a limit. If you say, sweetheart, you mustn't pull the cat's tail, and they'll grab the cat's tail and they'll look directly at you and they'll start to pull. It's like that's a stop me signal. It's like, I'm going to do this thing that I know you will set a limit around because I've got a big lot of feelings in my backpack and I want to offload them. I need to offload them in order to be able to function well. So the broken biscuit is about some small thing that, the biscuit's broken in half and there's a huge upset. That's a sign that a child is using a pretext to have an upset. The upset's actually about something else. You may have a hunch about what it is. Like I had a hunch when Thomas was climbing out of his car seat, that it was to do with what, just the big day that he'd had. It doesn't really matter whether your hunch is right or not. What you have in front of you is something that needs to be dealt with. So some small thing like a broken biscuit, a minor physical hurt, doing something you've explicitly asked them not to do. In fact, aggression, I actually don't like using the term aggression because it kind of assumes an intention to hurt, and it's not. It may look like that, but that's actually not the underlying emotional dynamic. But children push, fight, get nasty, get physical towards others when they're carrying an emotional backpack. Generally, that's fear. Emotions are actually not that complex. There's a few basic ones: grief, fear, physical stress. Yeah. So aggression, I think, is mostly a sign that a child is a little scared. Another way a child will show that they're off track is they won't be able to settle down to an activity. They shift from one to the other. They're agitated. That means they've got something in their emotional backpack that they're looking for a way to offload. If a child's consistently just not able to be reasonable, won't put their shoes on, any reasonable limit, you need to check always that what you're wanting from them is reasonable and probably to some extent sort of developmentally appropriate. Expecting a 2-year-old to get through a supermarket trip without touching everything is probably not a reasonable expectation. But if what you're wanting of them is reasonable, a 7-year-old who wants that sweet at the checkout, no, sweetheart, we're not going to have that sweet, but I really want that sweet. That child is unable to be reasonable. And often young ones show that they're in trouble. They're not easily able to make relaxed eye contact. We know what relaxed eye contact looks like. Anybody who's met a very young baby, very young babies in general have no trouble with relaxed eye contact. That's what I think humans look like when they're not carrying emotional tension, is that capacity to just be in contact with you and look straight into your eyes. So when a child has shown that they're off track, what we want to do is bring the limit. And this is the warm no. We need to get close. Doing it from the other side of the room really doesn't work. We need to stop irrational behavior. At this point, your child's thinking mind's not online, so you actually need to be the safety manager, expecting them to not break grandma's vase when they're flinging themselves around, or expecting them to take care of safety isn't going to work. You need to be the person who holds them close enough that they can't hurt anything, or who quickly moves grandma's vase away, or moves everyone away from a window that might get broken. And if you don't manage that, if somehow someone gets hurt or something gets damaged, you need to take responsibility for that. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I didn't get there fast enough. Because at that point, reading them the riot act is appealing to their thinking mind. And right then, they're in their feeling mind. They don't care about the window. When we're bringing a limit, we need to connect. We need to try and bring eye contact, gentle touch, and then we need to hold it. So we often get frustrated because we tell a kid something has to happen and they don't do it. What that means is that we need to come closer. We need to bring the limit closer, and we need to hold it. Sweetheart, you do need to put your shoes on. I know. You need to put your shoes on. So you keep holding that limit up as something that they can kind of use as an opportunity to get their feelings out. And expecting feelings is important. So compliance really isn't what we're after, and upsets are to be welcomed as part of the process of offloading emotional tension. So we need to expect feelings. Tears contain stress hormones and release grief. Tantrums are actually a very healthy way of releasing frustration. They're not well understood. Most of us have a lot of trouble tolerating them because I think we never got to have any tantrums. But they are the process by which a child releases frustration. And stages like the terrible twos, I actually don't believe in the terrible twos, but I think there are times in a child's life where they're stretching out developmentally. And so they're experiencing a lot more frustration as they're trying to master new skills. And they need to offload that frustration through tantrums. And we can hang in there with their tantrum. We don't need to ignore them. We don't need to try and fix it up. We don't need to stop them. We can just be comfortable that they're having a tantrum. Tantrums, pure tantrums, which are the release of frustration, are actually very quick. They're hot and fast. They're usually not very personal. So in some ways that can be easier to handle. When our kids get mean, it's harder for us not to take it personally. And laughter heals fears. Laughter is about how we, experience, get rid of fear. That's why kids, when they're in trouble, they'll laugh. Teachers don't like it that much, but yeah. Once a child's, if you're able to hang in there with anyone really who's crying or tantruming or laughing or raging, if we cannot take it personally and hang in there and keep things safe, what on the other side of it will happen is that thinking and cooperation are restored. We call the process of listening to feelings stay listening. So stay listening allows us to drain the feelings that are driving off-track behaviour. We need to move close and be warm. We need to bring the limit and make it safe. As I said, telling a kid not to fight with his brother or sister from the other side of the room probably isn't going to cut it. You actually need to get in there between them. I'm not going to let you do that, honey. You need to expect feelings to erupt and make time and space to listen to feelings. And you need not to take it personally. They may target you. In upsets, children often do. In fact, adults do it as well. And it's a way of working on some big feeling that might be a bit hard to really face in any direct way. So don't take it personally. You can decide that being told that you're the worst mother ever, it's actually a badge of honor. If a child's saying that stuff in the middle of an upset, we call that freedom of the mouth. You don't need to punish them for what they're saying when they're in the middle of an upset. They'll be wild. But once they've finished that, then they'll be able to function well. And you really want there to be only 5 words. You want to bring a limit with 5 words or less. This is a really good guide for every single parent on the planet. The reason is, once we use more than 5 words, we're trying to appeal to a child's thinking mind. Sweetheart, I need you to stop this because you're hurting your brother and blah, 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 blah. I need you to get back in the car seat, sweetie. It's not safe for us to drive without you being in your car seat. He already knows that. He's just full up to the brim with feelings that are getting in the way of doing what needs to be done. So if you're using 5 words, you're much less likely to start getting into trying to justify your limit. Your limit is fine. It just needs to be brought to your child. I'm not going to let you do that is probably really a good all-purpose limit setting thing. Later on, maybe, depending on how old the child is, you might talk about reasons, but not once a child's already shown they're off track, because their thinking mind is not there. And once you start to use more than 5 words, you're reaching for their thinking mind and you're one step ahead of where the process is at. You don't necessarily need to fix whatever the problem is or argue about it, just hold the limit. And in general, we need to work quite hard at not stopping the crying or the emotional upset. We really don't need to say very much. We don't need to tell kids to calm down. We don't need to offer them a glass of water. We don't need to offer them their binky or their their soft toy or whatever, unless we've had enough and we need everything to stop because we've had enough, and then it's fine. But basically, we can safely and confidently listen to that upset, and on the other side will be a child who can function better. And when you've done that, it's worth noticing how your child is afterwards. So it's a balancing act, basically. You're balancing the big yes, which is special time, which warms things up and has a child deeply understanding that you're on their side, which they borrow from when you bring the warm no. So the warm no is the limit, and they're borrowing. You do go against a child's will, almost by definition. I think some of us who were treated very harshly as young ones, we try to parent really reasonably. But that's often a trap. I think we need to be confident. We need to really look at whether the limits we set are reasonable, and then we need to be really ready to limit where necessary, and we need to do it with warmth. Yep. The other thing worth understanding is that it's worth connected with sort of trying to treat your child with respect and ending up not setting enough limits. It's good to limit early and limit often. So long as you're doing plenty of special time, you've got plenty of credit in the bank. So as soon as your child's off track, it's a useful thing to set a limit. So if you can't get out the door in the morning, chances are there were probably half a dozen signs from when you got up that your child was not in good shape. And if you could intervene early, you might not end up in that really tight spot when you're trying to get out of the house. So noticing when your child's off track and feeling free to bring some sort of limit at that point. It's simply something that you can say no to in a warm way and then listen to the upset that may create enough grease that the wheels start turning again. Children need limits. They need limits in order to interrupt where they're off track, in order to have an upset to get rid of and process the emotional tension that's causing them not to be able to think straight and causing them to be off track. You really don't want to wait until you're at the end of your rope. If you get to that, yeah, you need patience, and it's better to bring a limit early in the process when you first notice someone's off track while you're still in good shape and you're not irritated, than it is to have tried to fix up a problem 6 times and by the 6th, 7th time you've had it. Or, getting to the point where you've really got the squeeze on and you have to get out of the house. And the other thing to understand is that I talked a little bit about pretexts. Children's feelings show up they're big feelings, and they show up in small packages. Sometimes I think the smaller the pretext, the bigger the feeling. So your child may be working on big feelings of separation around not being able to have the soft toy that they want, or having lost the blankie, or not wanting to eat dinner, or not wanting to, So those sort of baffling and confusing little upsets that children have that are completely nuts, those are actually a child showing you that they've got some big feelings that they've stalled on. Some little thing has stalled them and provided an opportunity, if you can set a limit there, to have those big feelings. So in order to do all of this, we are going to need support. Even special time, I have to say. Parents love special time. When I do a talk, I regularly get feedback that people have just really enjoyed special time. What happens though is that it becomes a place where a child can show us where they've got tensions about things we're not relaxed about. Even special time gets hard, and certainly listening to children's upsets is something that's quite difficult to do, and we need some time out. And a very powerful way to get the support that you need is to set up a listening partnership. You don't need a professional to do this, although it's sometimes useful to find someone who's very practiced at listening, especially around certain topics. But generally, if you can find a partner and you set up, it's not a conversation, but you're going to take turns listening to one another. You set a timer, because some people are big talkers. I don't have trouble talking. But some people are a bit shy and have more trouble taking up space, but everyone has a story to tell. So it's just the best way to do it is just decide you've got an hour, you're going to swap 25 minutes each or 5 minutes each, and you put a timer on, and one of you listens while the other talks, and then you swap over. And when you're listening, you're practicing this thing that we want to be able to offer our children, which is to really see the other person, to listen with warmth and your full attention, but to keep your agenda out of the way. So don't interrupt, don't give advice, don't offer them your opinion. This is not the space for doing that. It's a space where you really want to create emotional safety for someone else to tell you what's really going on for them. And as parents, we don't have that many places where we can be honest and not afraid that we're going to be judged or that what we say is going to be used against us. So you really want to keep it confidential. It won't go anywhere else. When it's your turn, you might be reminded of something someone else has said, and it's fine to talk about how you're reminded, but you don't want to take the other person's story out of the safety of the listening time that they've been using when you've been listening to them. So if you're reminded of something in your own story by someone else's, you can just start by telling that's how that is for you, rather than how someone else reminded you of it. But this kind of confidential, safe place to talk about what it's really like helps us go back again with more slack to listen to our kids and more slack to play with them in ways that are useful to them. And one of the things that we can usefully pay attention to when we get someone to listen to us, parenting's a bit shocking, and because we end up responding to our children and reacting to our children in ways we didn't really think we were going to. It wasn't our plan, but we get reactive and we get mean and harsh and do things we wish afterwards we hadn't done. What's happening there is that there's something about the interaction with our child that is reminding us, well, one is that we're backed up and tired and sick of it all. And that's where listening partnerships can just relieve some of that general tension. But we also are channeling what happened to us. So what happened to us, it's like, and some of it we just breathed in the kind of like the air that we breathed in. And when our child does something, what happens is we just breathe it out, and out it comes. And it came in that easily, and it comes out that easily. So a lot of our struggles in parenting, a lot of them are to do with how we were parented, and listening partnerships can be a place where we can talk about how limits were set in our own childhood and talk about what our biggest triggers are. Somehow our brain connecting our early experiences with the struggle that we have in our relationship with our children, that is a good first step towards getting to the point where we can not just react to our children, but when they present us with something that's difficult for us to handle, we've got a space to step back and say, what is this? What's the best way to respond to this, and then choose the best response based on how things are, rather than how you feel. We probably will get a question about rewards and consequences. What I would say briefly is that it's not a useful framework for thinking about what needs to happen, because it's assuming that a person can think about the problem, that they can remember the reward that's been promised or remember the consequence, that they can care about the reward or promise or consequence. And when someone's really in distress and when someone's carrying a backpack full of emotional tension, they may have a lot of difficulty being motivated by either what the consequence will be or what the reward might be. It's really not a framework. It's a framework that assumes that the problem is that people aren't thinking straight, and that you just need to get them motivated to think better. It doesn't address the emotional problem, which is driving off-track behavior. So when a child is in trouble, they're in their feeling mind. They may not give a flying anything about the consequence that's going to be meted out if they behave in a certain way. Once they're full of feelings, that's what's driving the show. There's also some fairly clear research that offering rewards as motivation actually reduces a person's internal sense of motivation. So it actually diminishes the resource they have for doing the right thing. Often when offered sort of rewards around achievement, people do worse than they would have done if they were just chuffing along under their own steam. Rewards and consequences are a challenging framework for your relationship with your child, because they assume that you're going to be able to implement the reward or implement the consequence. And as your kids get older, that's a much less straightforward project. You really don't want to be relying on power and control at a point in your relationship where they're bigger than you. So it's not going to be a helpful framework. And the bottom line is, it doesn't meet the real need. Trying to get your kid motivated to clean up their room in order to get some toy they want doesn't really, if they're having difficulty cleaning up their room, it's because there's an emotional problem there, that a sense of connection that needs to be remedied one way or another. Yeah. In the end, the thing we would say is that the consequence of off-track behavior is connection. And when you connect with a child, they'll either be able to get back on track, or they'll be able to have an upset that, that gets them through. So you can learn more. Madeline at madelinewinter.com is the easy way to get hold of me. As I said, there's a great course that will help flesh this stuff out, which I can, recommend to you and send you the links for if you get in touch with me. I'm really, really happy to spend some time with you if you'd like to just talk, so I can get a better picture of what it is that your struggle is, happening around, and how we might tackle that. So that's my spiel.
Madeline, that was absolutely amazing. I sorted out my sound. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
That we had those technical issues at the beginning,
right.
And I didn't get to give you an introduction, a proper introduction, but I seem to have figured it out now. So I've never done it from home before, and it's just my third week at Randwick Council. But I just, I've raised 4 adult children, and they're all wonderful, but what you taught today is absolutely phenomenal. Seriously, I learned so much from that, and I wish I'd heard that when I was raising kids. Honest to God, you put it so simply, and just the way and the way you distilled all about rewards and consequences, and the need for connection being at the heart of all of that difficult behavior. And I loved it to nip it in the bud early in the day, and to have that support for yourself, because parenting is a shock. It is hard. Yeah. And you've really nailed it, Madeline. So I love that you've offered everyone a consultation. That's really generous of you, and your website there for resources. We don't have any questions, but
Hang on, there are
I don't
there are
see any
things in the
questions.
Q&A there. Do you,
I don't have access. I don't see any in mine. So mine looks empty. I apologize, and I don't know why.
Okay, they're technical problems mostly. The answer to one of them is we'll get a recording of this webinar, although I've got a feeling it got turned on a bit late.
No, it got turned on only in like 2 minutes late. It really, I checked the time. It was just, it really wasn't. I think we started when it was about being a good parent as the framework, which I love that too, because
I was going to say, yeah. So as like you said, you've raised 4 children, and when we get new frameworks for understanding what's going on, I've worked with parents for a long time now, and almost the first place we go to is we wish that we had someone's raised a hand.
Someone has asked a question now in the Q&A. Okay. I do have access to Q&A, but the chat.
I've got a few questions people provided ahead of time as well. But what I was going to say is we get this stuff and then we feel bad because we didn't know it before.
I do.
And the reality is it wouldn't matter what happened, we'd be feeling bad. It's a condition of parenting. And we almost, I mean, I don't know what to do about that. It's so vicious. And it's like it cuts us out of the knees. You know, it's like maybe we are terrible parents, but if we go down that rabbit hole, we're not going to be able to fix up whatever it is that needs attention.
Yeah, and I've had to let it go. I mean, my kids are adults, and I've just had to say I did the best I could.
You did.
But that is, I think that whole societal thing, I don't know if it's a feminist issue. I'm older than probably the parents on the line here, but you know, back in the day, it was always mom's fault. So no matter what, it was mom's fault. So look, I think that's a really good point, but I've got a couple of questions here.
Okay.
Madeline.
Yep.
Alexander's asked, are there any situations where reward and consequences is appropriate?
I think you have to make, I'm generally don't think they work. I think that overall they eat away at a child's sense of connection with you and their sense that you really have confidence in them. I think you probably need to make that I mean, there may be some circumstances where you both decide on a goal and it can be an organizing principle. I think that's where a child is already in good shape and can get themselves organized around achieving that goal, that might be the reward. But as a way of trying to get kids to behave right, it really doesn't work. What you need, in a way, we need to get off, we get very preoccupied with what we want our kids to do. And actually what we need to be putting our attention on is how connected are we? And if we're not well connected, then that's going to be a problem that needs to be addressed first. And sometimes, and I didn't get to talk about this, but it's connected. It's like sometimes we need to drop the whole deal. We need to just put up with the crappy behavior or do a workaround because the total amount of connection in our relationship at that point with the child isn't good enough for it to work. We're just going to lose our temper, or they're just going to get, it's just going to escalate. So what we want to take is a very flexible approach, and you know, good luck with rewards and consequences. Basically, what the deal is, once a child is in trouble with you know, that they're carrying emotional tension that's getting in the way of their thinking, what you will find is that they can't get organized around whatever the sort of reward in front of them is or the consequence is behind them. You really want to try and figure out where you can set a limit or provide connection, and that will be what helps. So I don't know if that helps. I don't know if I just said this, but what this means, this was probably the most wonderful thing I learned from this approach to parenting, is that consistency isn't vital.
Wow.
And a lot of parenting programs out there, it's all really big on consistently. Can see if you've got to be consistent. The framework behind that is wrong. It's like, if I'm not consistent, my child will get the wrong idea. The framework there is that the child is functioning from their thinking mind. And actually, if you're in trouble with your kid, someone's in their feeling mind. It could be you, or it could be them. And if there isn't enough connection, then it doesn't matter. People often get into this trouble around trying to figure out sleeping, limit setting around sleep. Or I work often with parents who, I love to work with parents at the point where they're beginning to wean, because there are big feelings for a little one to feel that are really important around, say, the separation that comes with ending a breastfeeding or nursing relationship. And in that process, it's really important to understand that you can bring the limit, tonight, sweetheart, you're going to sleep in your own bed. And there might be a big upset about that. And you get to a point where you've had enough. It's okay to let them into your bed. They've drained that feeling that's there around sleeping on their own as much as you can give them a hand with tonight. And really, you just need to figure out how everybody can get a decent sleep and have another go at it when you've next got resource. So consistency isn't vital because it's an emotional project that you're involved in, and it's about what you have the slack for, what your kid has the slack for, and what the overall sort of state of things is. So having to do, I found it a huge relief. I'm bad at consistency. So yeah.
That is a relief. And I think it gives people permission to take care of themselves while they're parenting. And I think that's a challenge that parents have. You're saying everyone's at their limit at that point.
Yeah.
Like you've got to, you keeping warm to your child's at need, but also that knowing what's going on for us at the same time. That's really fantastic.
Yeah.
Look, I've got another question here. What is the best approach when your older child is off track but has no interest in connecting? That's a really good
It's a good question.
Wow.
It is a whole different topic. 12 is, this approach works easiest with young children for a number of reasons. Partly because the younger the child, the more open they are emotionally. So you bring a limit, it's easier to connect, and you bring a limit, and the upset is just closer to the surface. The older we get, the more we've learned to squash our feelings down. So when you're, I should do another talk. I did a talk, I think earlier this year, about tweens and teens. I don't know how much older this person's talking about, but much generally beyond 10, you need to approach the project of building connection a little bit less directly. So if your child isn't interested in connecting, one of the first steps in repairing things with older kids is to really notice when they invite you in. And those bids for your attention may be very small. The one that parents often, I was talking recently with a friend who has really worked hard to retain the drive to and from school, even though their kid's big enough to hop on the bus. And he told me that what happens on that drive to school is that his daughter puts on music, and it's become a spot where she invites him in. She's showing him what she's interested in terms of her music. Driving in the car is actually a pretty cool space for building connection with older kids. They often can't take as direct a overture as we can get away with younger kids. We sort of need to come at it sideways. But if your relationship with your older kid is in trouble, it's a more complex project to figure out how to build connection, and bowling up to them and offering it the issue is that once they're that old, you're offering it when it suits you, not necessarily when it suits them. And as they get older, they need to have more control over when it suits them. Yeah. There's a lot more to say about sort of preteen and teenage connection building and limit setting.
Oh, that would be a fantastic presentation, and we could talk about offering that in the next few months with our next parenting calendar, Madeline.
I'd be really happy to do that. And
yeah, yeah, I've heard a lot of people, especially because it's free, it's such a great resource. I've heard a lot of people talk about well, free for the community, obviously, but I've heard a lot of people talk about their concern about older teens being online, and that, I don't know if that's a whole other thing, but I think it has to do with that connection, like you're talking about. And
it does. And that's an area where we get quite anxious around limit setting, and it's like actually really complex.
And have I lost my child?
It's really complex.
So let's talk about bringing that into a webinar for, so we can have as many people attend as possible, because when we have the live ones, we have the limits, of course. I've got a couple more questions.
What I would say though is, to whoever that person is who asked that question, get in touch with me.
Great.
I have an 18-year-old, so I've I know what you're talking about. And there is it's important. So there is stuff that can be done.
Yeah.
Have we got other questions? Or
yes, we do.
Okay. Cool.
And I don't know how much more time you have, Madeline. I think we've got until 11:30. Is that right?
That's the plan. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So one person said, great presentation, which I agree with. What is your comment or suggestion when you have kids of different ages, say ages 2 and 4, of different personalities in setting limits and regarding cooperation? Also, when you have 2 kids, is special time better outside the house, like a one-on-one time, or in a room playing or doing a certain task?
Okay, they're 2 great questions. And I had a bunch of questions come in before the webinar. I was just looking through them before we started, and it's like, okay, so one of the topics is, how do I deal with sibling difficulties? And in general, when we've got more than one kid, there's sort of, we need a lot of the tensions in everyone's interaction with everyone else, including in their interactions with each other, is to do with their sense of connection with you. So if you came and chatted to me because your kids are squabbling with each other, the first thing I'd say is they need a direct line in to each of their carers, adult carers, independent of the other kids. So they need a one-on-one time with at least one of you who's caring for them. If there's 2 people, adults caring, then each kid ideally needs a special time on a reasonably regular basis with each of those parents. Their sense of their connection cup being filled with you eases their interaction with their sibling. It's interesting how much it's often not about the sibling, it's about sort of competing for your attention and for a sense of connection with you. So that's the first place to start. I think every kid's different. So you need to, like the question was, the kids are different ages and different personalities. Each child is different. Each child, to some extent, you work with what pops out, and kids pop out different. So, I think we can meet a child's early needs or emotional struggles better or worse, but sometimes we're just dealing with 2 very different people. And what I love about this approach is that it's about taking making a really flexible assessment of how connected you all are, of how much pressure there is on the whole family. Sometimes there's particular pressure on one kid and the other one's fine. So you'll be needing to do a lot more special time with one of the kids. Like a transition to school is in fact a very stressful time for a child. It's a time where it really makes sense to bump up the amount of special time. Overall, if you've got more than one child, you need to have an overall generally equal sort of approach to them, like not be favoring one over the other. But because it's a flexible approach, which is about assessing what's going on for each person in the complex arrangement that is your family, dealing with one child differently from another isn't a big deal at all. I would expect that. It's always more challenging when you've got more than one. Like having two upset kids at once is a challenge, to listen to both of them, but it's doable. So I don't know that I've got anything more specific to say other than that different kids are different, and there isn't a formula that's going to work the same way with each of them. Some kids, you know, come out whiny, and you need to be thinking about how to jiggle that around and set limits around that. Other kids come out fighting, you know, and other kids come out easy. Great question about where to do special time. Again, I have one child. What I've noticed about working with parents of one child is that because we don't have the same pressure on our time, we tend not to schedule, tend not to figure out where we can fit special time into our schedule. And then what happens is special time tends to drop off. What I've noticed about parents who take it on who've got more than one child is that they have to figure out where to schedule it. And once it gets into the schedule, it sticks. So I find actually that parents who take it on and get it inserted into their schedule and figure out where and when to do it with more than one child, it actually sticks better than it often does in families that can get away with being a bit more lazy and only have one kid. Not that having any kid is an endeavor in laziness, but you know. And initially, when you're first beginning special time, parents with more than one child tell me that sometimes you can get to a point where they understand that they'll get their turn, and where you can perhaps, I'm a great fan of the strategic use of screen time. You can, if you're really desperate, you can stick one in front of the TV and do special time with the other. Once everyone understands what special time is, that often will work. Up until that point, it probably with two kids will mean that you have to find a time when the other kid isn't around, because I used to sometimes do special time in the park, and I had to begin calling it something else because I couldn't stick to it, because kids can smell that there's an adult around who's got a bit of attention and is willing to play. And before you know where you are, you've got 6 kids wanting to, I don't know, whatever it is, climb, you know, whatever it is. They can tell that you're going to give them some space. And that's what happens when you try to do special time with one child and there's another child around, until they kind of really get the hang of it. So I don't think it matters where you do it, particularly at first. You need to figure out some place to do it where you need to put away your distractions, because they need to know how long they've got you. That's a really important part of it. That's why you time it, and that's why you announce it. Special time works. It's almost a therapeutic process. So if I was listening to you as part of being a counselor for you, you would not feel safe to tell me your sagas if you thought any minute I was going to get peeled off to answer the door, because you might be in the middle of your story and I disappear. Children need the same degree of confidence in your attention in special time. I found, I think, especially at first, while you're all getting the hang of it, doing it in an environment that's less complex. So some kids want to go shopping in special time. I had to call it something else. I did my best to have general principles of special time for shopping expeditions, but it's such a complex environment. You're going to have to set limits around it when you're in the middle of it. And that's really not what you want to do in special time. So especially at first, you probably want to keep the environment as much under your control as possible. So, you know, outside might be fine if what you have to do is be away from the other child, but you really want to open up special time as a time when a child can make any suggestion they want to about what they want to do. And if you're saying that special time can only happen outside, then you've already limited what they might want to show you. And special time is a space where you're opening it up so they can show you what they're interested in. And kids are so used to us making suggestions. We really have to practice getting out of their way. So I think that's a complicated answer. It depends on what your circumstances are. If the only way you can get out of the house with one of the kids without the other one is to go outside, then special time might need to be outside. But you might want to mix it up. If you've got someone who can take care of the other kid, perhaps they can go to the park while you're at home with your child.
I think that was a fantastic answer. And I like what you said about creating that space where you don't have to make limits for that special time. I think that was a really important point. Look, we've got a few more questions, and I don't know if you want to run through them all, but someone said, excellent answer. Yes, you're right. Someone has just put in, i.e. they don't want to discuss what they're feeling. I think that meant about the teens, or would it be possible, are they asking about young kids who don't want to talk?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's probably a good note to end on. I'm sorry I'm not going to get to the other questions, but I would really recommend that, you know, I'm really happy to spend a bit of time with you.
Take a shot.
Figure out how to get hold of me. Yeah. If it gets loaded, hopefully this will get loaded up onto what happens with the council is that you guys do some fiddling and it gets put up on the council's YouTube.
Yeah, that'll be up on a week or so. And you guys can,
and when we get it up there, I'll put in the comments section some links so that you can follow them.
Yeah, I love that question down the bottom. I want to hear the answer to that 5 words or less one. But yeah, I'll let you go, Madeline, with the rest of the answer for that. The feeling one.
It's really hard not to answer. Anyway, the feeling one's really important.
They're all fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
Please get in touch.
And we will be doing more webinars like this.
Yeah, we've got one scheduled for November. I forget what the topic is.
I don't know either. It's on the parenting calendar.
That's all right.
It's at on our website and also at the library. So the parenting calendar is on the Randwick Council website, and it will be listed on that.
Yep.
Yeah, but
I will just say the thing about feelings, that it's a really good question. The question is they don't want to discuss what they're feeling. It was probably in response to the older kid, but no, children in general don't want to talk. Like, you don't get upset if they can't say what they're feeling or they can't talk about what they're feeling. And a lot of parenting approaches are big on name your feelings. And the problem with that is that it's a cognitive process. You're actually asking them to step out of how they're feeling in order to analyze it and report on it. And that's pulling a child out of the emotional recovery process and into a cognitive process. Naming a feeling doesn't resolve it. So we don't actually need them to tell you what they're feeling. They will show you that they're in trouble, and if you know, as a parent of a child, you may be able to guess, because you know their history, what that's referring to, or what early trauma that's drawing on. But basically, young ones will show you what they're feeling through their behavior. And you just need to figure out how to set a limit so the feeling comes up to the surface, which will come up to the surface as laughter or crying or tantruming. There's a couple of others, but that's the pretty basic. So they'll be releasing lighter fears and embarrassments through laughter, frustrations through tantrum, and sadness through crying, and fears. Fears released through, we sweat and shake. It's a very physical process. So children will tell you what they're feeling and how they behave. And in particular, in special time, they'll tell you how they're feeling in what they choose to play and how they set up the play. It's always about something. So I'll tell a tiny little story about that. I did some special time with my friends. He was about 18 months old, or no, he must have been older than that because he had language. He might have been 2 or 3. And I happened to be visiting, and my friend and I did special time with him. He wanted to go to the park. We went to the park, and at the park, he instructed us, because we were doing special time, we'll do whatever you want to do, that we had to be scared of the ants. So my friend and I danced around being scared of the ants and got up on the picnic table and was scared of the ants. And I remember jumping into her arms. She was pretty vigorous, so she could catch me, and I was scared of the ants. And I just thought, I didn't think much of it. Special time ended, we all went home. But afterwards, my friend told me that the first time his dad had taken him to the park, when he was first walking, he'd stood on an ant nest, a bull ant nest. And so it was a perfect example. In special time, he was setting up the experience in play where he's the one in charge, and he gets to work through that experience from the position of being in charge. That is actually a healing process. And yeah, so it's always about something. He's processing his feelings, but he wouldn't be able to name it. He just sets it up in play. So play is tremendously powerful for helping kids process their feelings, and you really don't need to get them to talk about how they're feeling. You just need to figure out how to set a limit so they can actually feel it.
Wow, that was incredible too. Really
Right.
a wealth of fabulous, real information, and I think the great part about it, it's so accessible, and you're talking to people on our level. You know, it's not about you're the expert, you're a parent, and such great tips, Madeline. And I'm assuming you want to finish on time, but
we should finish.
Okay, I'll let you finish on time. And look, Madeline has generously offered this 20-minute consultation. So even I feel bad that we didn't answer the other questions. My heart goes out to you. But look, Madeline's offered to have a consult with you. Take a photo of the information on your screen right now and visit her website. I have already sent the information to my daughter and said, look, talk to this woman. She's amazing. Listen to it. It's incredible.
Well,
anyway, because I really, look, I've read a lot of parenting material in my day, and that was really excellent. So thank you so much, Madeline.
All right. Great.
And everyone have a great weekend. And thanks for your patience, everyone. And
yes, thank you for struggling through the beginning.
You were worried something
happened,
and it sure did. Okay.
Okay.
Have a great everyone.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.